The 2024 NFL free agency period was absolutely bonkers. Players were ditching their first home for division rivals, we saw some potentially game-breaking additions, we saw some teams just give up on life, and we saw Kirk Cousins become the most sought-after free agent quarterback since Kirk Cousins. Speaking of Kirk, he ended up being the NFL's highest paid free agent in 2024, getting a whopping $45 million per year. Glad the Falcons finally have a game plan set on the position with no plans of stirring the pot whatsoever. Time will tell how that pans out, but since I just went back and regraded a whole bunch of NFL trades, I figured I might as well do the same thing for free agency. Modern day free agency began in 1993, and I'm going to discuss the highest paid player by year and give the team a grade based on how the player did. I'm not going to blame a player for securing the bag, even if it's way more money than what their play warranted. My only ground rule is that it has to be a player who changed teams. Re-signings don't count. Let's go. The first ever big fish in modern day free agency was Reggie White. Easily the greatest defensive end in NFL history, he spent 8 seasons terrorizing the NFL with the Philadelphia Eagles, racking up 124 sacks during that time. You'd think an owner would be willing to literally lick their floor if it meant keeping that kind of guy around, but let's just say Norman Brahman didn't fancy the idea of coughing up, like, any money. With that bridge burnt, White signed a 4-year, $17 million contract with the Green Bay Packers. Surprise, surprise, White continued his excellence at Lambeau, racking up a sack total that's just shy of being nice, and in 1996, it all came to a head when he recorded 3 sacks in Super Bowl 31 and vaulting the Packers back to NFL glory. For a player with such prestige that it could have gone literally anywhere he wanted, it was definitely a surprise when he chose Green Bay, and every single penny was well spent. A few videos ago, I covered the 1993 Miami Dolphins and Dan Marino's mid-season Achilles tear. His replacement was the 6'6" Scott Mitchell, who had a few breakout performances at the perfect time for him to get a nice payday. Mitchell chose to sign a 3-year, $11 million deal with the Detroit Lions, who at the time felt like they were a quarterback away from being able to make some serious noise. With Barry Sanders and Lomas Brown on their offense, I don't blame them. Mitchell was a Lion for 4 years, and although he gets a lot of scrutiny, he was pretty good. Year 1 was a disaster, yes, but he was brilliant in 1995, and the next 2 years still gave above-average QB play. 69 touchdowns to 46 picks are damn fine stats in the mid-1990s, so why is his time in Motor City so reviled? Oh. Yeah, the hate Mitchell gets is kind of unwarranted, but not being able to win a playoff game with Barry effing Sanders will make everyone think you're the worst thing to ever exist. Tough luck, Scott. Alvin Harper was the NFL's ultimate Robin. While Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, and the Great Wall of Dallas were in the spotlight for decimating everything the NFL threw at them, Alvin Harper stood in the shadows as the league's ultimate number 2 receiver. 4 productive seasons in Dallas and a pair of Lombardis got him a $10 million deal over 4 years with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Harper was a career number 2 who is now transitioning into a number 1. It went poorly. Harper was never a good fit in Tampa Bay and only lasted 2 years before getting cut. He would only catch 2 more passes for the rest of his career. Alright, do me a favor real quick and watch this video.
Here's O'Donnell, big blitz, and he fires a pass, and it's pulled in and intercepted at the 40. Down at the 23-yard line is Larry Brown with a big interception. And the shame of it is O'Donnell threw it right to him. There was no receiver out there.
Oh, thought that was bad? Alright, real quick, check this out too.
Interception, we were blitzing, and I beat the receiver to the spot.
Here's the pass in the flat, picked up by the Cowboys. Larry Brown may score at the 30, 20, 10, out of bounds at the 6-yard line.
Now I know what you're thinking. Dang, this quarterback stinks. How is he in the Super Bowl? Well, 1, Neil O'Donnell was good enough to be the game manager of a really talented Pittsburgh Steelers team, and 2, did you know that the New York Jets saw that performance and proceeded to offer him $25 million? The Jets and intelligent football transactions don't exactly mix like PB&J, do they? Suffice to say, O'Donnell flopped as a Jet. His career in green lasted all of 20 games. Stinky. From one ex-Steeler to another, linebacker Chad Brown was due for his big boy contract after racking up 13 sacks in his last season with the black and yellow, which he parlayed into a $24 million contract over 6 years with the Seattle Seahawks. Think of Brown's time as a Seahawk almost like a diet Reggie White. Yes, they weren't exactly in the same position on defense, but like White, Brown had 8 productive seasons, and he averaged 6 sacks a year, which is padded down by his last year there in 04 where he only played 7 games. Consistency at the position for almost a decade, along with 2 Pro Bowls and an All-Pro in 1998 gives you the green check mark from me. Defensive lineman Shawn Gilbert's divorce from the Washington Redskins was an ugly one. It included a lost season, a lawsuit, 2 franchise tags, you name it. When Gilbert got the tag for the second time, he proceeded to sign a 7-year, $46.5 million offer sheet with the Carolina Panthers. Washington had no interest in meeting that price, so out went Gilbert for 2 first-round draft picks. Gilbert was okay in Carolina, helping bolster their run defense, but was never a standout on the field. Fine player, but did he warrant that much money and 2 first-rounders? In the mid-1990s, Dale Carter etched his name as one of the NFL's premier defensive backs, racking up 4 Pro Bowls with the Kansas City Chiefs. However, courtesy of some questionable character choices, the Chiefs let him go, and the Denver Broncos coughed up just south of $23 million over 4 years for him. Carter was a Bronco for just 1 year. He was given a seasons-long suspension for his upteenth drug violation, and he never played for the Broncos again. Real quick, close your eyes. Imagine yourself as a 30-something-year-old man who struck it rich in the advertising business, doing absolutely nothing illegal, and you found yourself in control of a proud NFL franchise. After running the whole front office out of town, you're presented with a golden opportunity. You have the chance to add Deion Sanders, prime time, to your team. How could you possibly say no? If you're trying to win a Super Bowl and the greatest corner of all time is ripe for the taking, then you have to pull the trigger. Unfortunately, it's time for some caveats. Caveat number 1, in this hypothetical, you are Dan Snyder. Sorry about that. Caveat number 2, it is the year 2000, meaning that Deion is 33 years of age. Not exactly the age that can handle the body of a prime cornerback. Caveat number 3, Deion has a down year, and although you signed him to a 7-year contract worth $56 million, he just says F it and retires after that first season. Not exactly the wisest use of $8 million a year. The 2002 Tampa Bay Buccaneers went down in history as one of the NFL's all-time great defenses, and acquiring pass rusher Simeon Rice from the Cardinals is a big reason why. Rice decimated offensive lines in Arizona, but his last year there was one losing season too many, so he hitched a ride to Tampa Bay for $41 million over 5 years. The best years of Rice's career came as a Buccaneer, racking up double-digit sacks in 5 straight years and playing a key role in his team dominating its way to winning Super Bowl 37. Welcome back, Mr. Snyder. Did you enjoy your 1-year gap from being in this video? For the second time, Washington chose to poach a big-name player from a division rival, snagging Pro Bowl linebacker Jeremiah Trotter from the Philadelphia Eagles. Trotter's 2 years in DC weren't super terrible, but safe to say he didn't meet the expectations his 7-year, $36 million contract put on him. After the Skins cut him, just to rub salt in the wound, he proceeded to go back to Philadelphia and immediately went back to his old self. Hey Dan, London Fletcher was a fluke. The first wide receiver to make this list since Alvin Harper is almost as big of a letdown. The 6'2", 240-pound David Boston had 2 great years with the Arizona Cardinals, including a bonkers year where he just had a lick under 1,600 receiving yards. That short stint of excellence in the desert got him a 7-year deal worth about $47 million with the San Diego Chargers. Of those 7 years, Boston played exactly 14 games. His one season wasn't bad by any means, but he had a hands problem and never really fit in the Chargers offense, so he was traded to the Dolphins the next season where he would catch a total of 4 passes. The next player to make this list is a defensive end who is such a force for the Tennessee Titans that he garnered the nickname The Freak. No, not that kind of freak, the kind that, you get it. Problem is that when Javon Curse signed an 8-year deal worth $66 million with the Philadelphia Eagles, he was never able to reach the numbers he amounted as a Titan. He was a solid contributor for the 2004 team that reached to the Super Bowl, but it's pretty clear that the Eagles didn't exactly get their money's worth. Sticking with the trend of defensive players getting the big bucks, cornerback Ken Lucas was never a Pro Bowl player, but he was always a quality starter at one of the most difficult positions in the game. His consistency in Seattle netted him the big bucks with the Carolina Panthers, a 6x6 deal to be exact. Lucas and Chris Gamble formed one of the NFL's best corner duos, and it helped the Panthers reach the NFC Championship, which was Lucas's 3rd straight postseason appearance. However, once there, Carolina ran into Lucas's old buddies in Seattle, who proceeded proceeded to give them the business for 60 minutes. Lucas got the Panthers 13 interceptions in 4 years before his career wound down back in Seattle. Not exactly a franchise changer, but far better than a lot of guys on this list. For a long time, it seemed like Reggie White was always going to be the gold standard for NFL free agent signings. However, that changed when former San Diego Charger Drew Brees went on the market after a devastating shoulder injury. Brees was initially going to be a Dolphin, but due to some health concerns, Nick Saban's crew got cold feet and instead went for Dante Culpepper, who also had some medical concerns. Instead, the New Orleans Saints ponied up $60 million over 6 years for Brees' services. All he did was become one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history, becoming the all-time leading passer for a time, winning the Saints their first ever Super Bowl, playing in part in like 13 different devastating playoff losses, and becoming a franchise icon. I think things panned out just fine. Fun fact, there was a time when cornerback Nate Clements was the highest paid defender in NFL history. 6 solid seasons with the Buffalo Bills got the 27-year-old an 8-year deal worth a whopping $80 million from the San Francisco 49ers. Clements only played out half of that deal, but was a decent number 1 corner. He was never a Pro Bowler in San Francisco, but gave stability at the position. He was cool and all, but I don't think that kind of play justifies $80 million. The Oakland Raiders are no strangers to mind-boggling front office decisions, yet believe it or not, this is actually their only appearance on this list. Wide receiver Javon Walker had a complicated career. A late first-round pick in 2002 who had a reputation as a playoff ace before having a legitimate breakout season in 2004, then instantly tried to force his way out of Green Bay due to contract concerns. He initially intended to sit out the entire 2005 season, but unfortunately a torn ACL did that for him in week 1. He then went to Denver, got a nice payday, and proceeded to crack 1,000 yards for the second time. Unfortunately, tragedy struck not too long after. On New Year's Day 2007, Walker's teammate Darrent Williams was killed in a drive-by shooting. There's a lot of theories about what happened that night, who the actual target was, or why there was a shooting in the first place, but a gang member was convicted of the crime in 2010. Skip past an unproductive 2007 for Walker, and the Raiders decided to give the soon-to-be 30-year-old a 6-year, $55 million contract. Walker only appeared in 11 games for Oakland and totaled less than 200 receiving yards with them. Walker ended up collecting 21 of that $55 million. All in all, Javon Walker got paid over $100,000 per receiving yard he got in the silver and black. For the third and final time in this video, will Dan Snyder and the Washington Redskins please take the stand? A game-wrecking defensive lineman is available for the taking? How could you not throw 9 digits at the guy and sign him on the very first day of free agency? That's not suspicious at all. The Buccaneers actually offered him more money, but that's besides the point. What matters is that the Redskins now have a new face of their defense. Need I say more? Pass rushers have proven to be a hot commodity throughout this video, and the next big fish was Julius Peppers, a 5-time Pro Bowler in Carolina. They let him walk after year 8, and he inked a 6-year deal worth over $91 million with the Chicago Bears. Peppers played 4 of those 6 years and racked up a total of 37.5 sacks during that span, and was the anchor of an elite defense that reached the NFC Championship in 2010. I don't really have any jokes to crack here. Peppers was really good in Carolina and remained really good in Chicago. Oh, did I mention after the Bears cut him, he instantly bolted for the Green Bay Packers? The 2010 Philadelphia Eagles were a blast to watch. A rejuvenated Michael Vick along with LaShawn McCoy and Deshaun Jackson headlined one of the NFL's best offenses. After pulling off one of the greatest comebacks in NFL history to win the NFC East, Philadelphia decided it was time to go all in. They made a plethora of deals, acquiring Ronnie Brown, Evan Mathis, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, Vince Young to back up Vick, the other Steve Smith, and the highest paid free agent in 2011, cornerback Nnamdi Asomugha. He had just come off 3 elite years in Oakland, which included 2 first-team All-Pros. Now, giving a 30-year-old cornerback $60 million over 5 years may seem crazy now, but in Philadelphia, the expectations were sky high. The new dream team was... yeah. The Eagles were a huge letdown, and Asomugha was one of the main reasons why. He was absolute food in Philly, and he got cut after only 2 years. One of the biggest free agent blunders of all time. Can you believe there was a time when Peyton Manning was just chilling on the free agent market for teams to bid on at one point? The answer is yes, because we just saw the same thing with Tom Brady 4 years ago, but I digress. With the Colts having locked into the first overall pick and the rights to the phenom Andrew Luck, and being scared by Manning's neck injury, they decided to let him go. Damn near the whole league would have done pretty much anything to get him, but it was the Denver Broncos that won out. We all make fun of the Broncos now for selling the farm to get a veteran superstar quarterback, but hey, it worked before. The Broncos were able to squeeze out the last few elite years Manning had left and turn them into an AFC powerhouse. They reached the Super Bowl in his second year with them, which didn't work out, but when Manning's abilities finally started to dissipate, the Broncos suddenly assembled one of the greatest defenses mankind has ever seen, and were able to win Manning one more Super Bowl on his way out. A storybook ending for one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever step foot on the field. No team is better at grooming elite wide receivers like the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's almost tradition for some random wideout they draft in the mid to late rounds to blossom into a star out of basically nowhere, hence why there are times where the Steelers feel like they can just let them go when it's time to pay them, thinking they can just do it again. That was the case for third-round pick Mike Wallace. In 4 years in Pittsburgh, Wallace was the pinnacle of consistency, averaging about 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns a year. This consistency got him a $60 million deal over 5 years with the Miami Dolphins. Wallace was a solid piece in Miami, but didn't crack 1K with them, and they cheaped out and flipped him to Minnesota after only 2 years. There's a reason those Broncos were able to put together one of the best defenses the NFL has ever seen. After getting gutted up and down the field in Super Bowl 48, they went after cornerback Aqib Talib to pair him up with Chris Harris Jr. and wooed him over with a 6-year deal worth $57 million. The 2015 Broncos defense was a masterful construction of players with both talent and veteran experience, and Talib making 4 straight Pro Bowls was a big reason why. After 4 great years in Denver, he was flipped to the Rams. We've gone from Denver, Miami, back to Denver, and now we're back in Miami. For the first 5 years of his career, Ndamukong Suh was an absolute menace on the Detroit Lions defensive front, just like he was at Nebraska. He was a first-team All-Pro as a rookie and earned 2 more of them before turning 28 years old. However, partially due to the obscene amount of money he would demand on the market, and for his questionable conduct, when it was time for free agency, the Lions let him walk away. The Dolphins, no strangers to big free agency splashes, made Suh the highest paid defensive player in history at the time. 6 years, $114 million. Suh would only play through half of that contract. Don't get me wrong, he remained good on the Dolphins, reaching his 5th Pro Bowl in 2016 and helped Miami get to the playoffs for the first time in 8 years, but a deep playoff run eluded Ryan Tannehill and Adam Gase, and as is accustomed for Stephen Ross's Dolphins, they found their backs against the wall in terms of salary cap, and they cut Suh after the 2017 season. He played for 3 teams in the next 5 years, reaching 3 Super Bowls in the process, and in 2020, finally won a ring with Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Until Deshaun Watson and CJ Stroud came along, the Houston Texans were a franchise commonly starved for top-flight quarterback play. Up to this point, the best quarterback the franchise had was Matt Schaub, who was cool, I guess. But the point is, the franchise guy still eluded them. But when the opportunity to acquire a Super Bowl champion was in front of them, they couldn't resist signing him for $72 million over 4 years. The quarterback in question? Brock Osweiler. The 6'7" Osweiler was kind of okay in 7 games he started in Denver. Hey, there's the 2015 Broncos again. So Houston decided he was the guy. Texans' Brock Osweiler is one of the biggest memes in recent NFL history, so it goes without saying that the partnership did not work out. However, courtesy of a strong defense, a pathetic division, and getting to play the physically and mentally broken Raiders in the wild card, Osweiler did win a playoff game for what it's worth. It wasn't good enough for the Texans to let the experiment go on for even 1 more year, and they shipped him off along with a 2nd-round pick to the Browns for basically nothing in return just so they would eat his contract. Osweiler proceeded to play exactly 0 games in Cleveland. For the 3rd time in this video, the Arizona Cardinals are letting a prize star walk away in free agency to secure the big bucks elsewhere. Granted, it didn't exactly blow up in their face when it was David Boston, but when it's Calais Campbell, safe to say it will be. Campbell took a 4-year, $60 million deal to head east for the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jags were looking to build an elite defense, and Campbell was the missing piece. Partially thanks to Campbell having the best season of his career, they were able to do so in 2017. He totaled 14.5 sacks on the season, and he probably should have won Defensive Player of the Year, but it went to Aaron Donald instead. The Jags rode their defense all the way to the AFC Championship, where they were oh so close to knocking off Brady's Patriots, but thanks to some controversial calls and a 10-point fourth quarter lead blown, it didn't happen. And the team the Jaguars spent years building was immediately torn to pieces. Campbell lasted longer than many of his teammates, but he ended up being flipped for a late-round pick to Baltimore in 2020. 2024 wasn't the first time Kirk Cousins became the highest-paid free agent in a season. He went through the same process in 2018. After RG3's body basically gave out on him, Cousins emerged into one of the league's better passers. After Washington pinned him with the franchise tag twice, he was able to explore the market where the stubborn Minnesota Vikings, fresh off an NFC Championship appearance, signed Kirk to a fully guaranteed $84 million contract over 3 years. Kirk's tenure in Minnesota only just recently came to an end, and now that it can all be put into perspective, I think Kirk's time in Minnesota is a perfect personification of the franchise's philosophy. This is another team that historically doesn't draft and develop quarterbacks as long-term projects. For one reason or another, they usually lean towards adding a proven veteran to try to get it done with a win-now roster. Cousins had to endure a lot of narratives about his play while in purple, some of which he overcame, some of which he didn't. Cousins' statistics look very nice on paper, but occasional stinkers often sunk him and the Vikings. 2022 was the outlier of the entire franchise's history, where an objectively average team saw literally every close game break their way until the postseason. The 2022 Vikings went 11-0 in one-possession games in the regular season, and since this is the Vikings we're talking about, of course they lost their first playoff game by 7 points. All in all, Kirk Cousins threw for over 23,000 yards and 171 touchdowns to 55 picks with a QB rating over 100, but only went 50, 37-1 and only won 1 playoff game. How you feel about Kirk Cousins is probably directly aligned to how much you value wins as a quarterback stat. If you ask me, I think it matters to a certain degree, but context is often necessary. All in all, Kirk is a very good quarterback who lacks the high-end traits to win a Super Bowl, which I think perfectly encapsulates the Minnesota Vikings franchise. Yet another instance of a Super Bowl winning quarterback being available in the open market, except this time it's not entirely a bit. I still have no idea how it happened, but in 2017, Nick Foles somehow turned his career from one-year wonder to Super Bowl MVP in like a month and change. After willing the Eagles to their first ever Super Bowl, he willed them to a playoff win again the next year, then hit the open market when the Eagles decided to ride with Carson Wentz anyways. After the Jacksonville Jaguars imploded in 2018 and ran Blake Bortles out of town, they threw $88 million over 4 years at Foles with the intention of bringing back the good times. Nick Foles won as many games for the Jaguars as you and I. He was swiftly given the cold shoulder in favor of fan favorite Gardner Minshew. After just 1 year, he was dealt to the Bears, where he'd returned to where he was before his magic carpet ride with the Eagles, and as a matter of fact, what he's done everywhere else other than the Eagles. A backup. I still can't conceive the fact that Tom Brady was a free agent out on the open market, and the bidding war for him didn't include like half the league. I've gone over Brady's exit from New England in my most viewed video, but it just baffles me that the Patriots wouldn't do absolutely everything necessary to make sure he never wore another uniform. It sounds like he was initially going to be a Raider until John Gruden stepped in and, quote, blew the deal up. Instead, as we all know, Brady joined the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for 2 years and $50 million in guaranteed money. Brady found himself in a team that hadn't made the playoffs in 13 years and instantly won Super Bowl number 7. Not much else to say. The New York Giants post-2011 aren't exactly known for wise decision-making, and it showed here. After shipping Odell Beckham Jr. off, the Giants were still looking for a new alpha dog, a new number one receiver for quarterback Daniel Jones. Despite pushes from the Bengals and Bears, the Giants were the ones to acquire the services of Detroit's Kenny Golladay. Despite only playing 7 games in 2020 due to injuries, the Giants decided to throw $72 million over 4 years at him. In one of Dave Gettleman's final mind-numbing decisions, Golladay very much did not become the new number one receiver New York was looking for. His entire stay in the Big Apple amounted to just a tad over 600 yards receiving. He was cut after the 2022 season and hasn't played in the NFL since. Von Miller was one of many win-now acquisitions the LA Rams made with the intention of winning a Super Bowl as soon as possible, and it worked, getting 4 sacks in the postseason and being a contributor to the Rams' Super Bowl 56 win. Perfect timing for the 32-year-old to hit free agency. He was linked to the Cowboys throughout much of the process, but out of nowhere, the Buffalo Bills swooped in and snagged Miller for a 6-year deal worth a whopping $120 million. The Bills were pretty much everyone's Super Bowl pick, partially in thanks to this acquisition, yet Miller's 2022 season was halted after 11 games due to a torn ACL. The injury persisted into next season, and paired with some shaky legal troubles, 2023 was essentially a lost season for Miller. This relationship is definitely not over yet, as Miller survived Buffalo's veteran purge this past offseason. Miller is under contract until he's 38, and a third of the way through this partnership, it's not looking good. Finally, we have this past season. Ever since Drew Brees retired, the New Orleans Saints have been hell-bent on being the Chicago Bulls of football, just permanently meh. The writing's been on the wall for them to tear it all the way down and just sit back for a while, but they just refuse. The Raiders just threw Derek Carr under the bus after Josh McDaniels ran the organization into the dirt. Well, who better to get him than the Saints? 4 years, $150 million. Sounds ridiculous in hindsight, but that's probably just where the quarterback market is right now. The stigma around Derek Carr has taken a total 180 over the last couple of years. Not too long ago, he was the star who just had no help on a dysfunctional Raiders organization, and 1 season later, he's now suddenly the worst thing to ever exist, apparently. Statistically, Carr was passable, but similarly to Kirk Cousins, he just seems to lack that oomph that the elites at the position have, except Carr isn't as good as Cousins. Carr is clogging up a lot of salary cap space to contribute basically 0 positives to the Saints offense, and the team is basically in no different of a position that they were in 2 years ago. There's still time, but yeah, I'm not exactly optimistic. And that brings us to now, where, as I alluded to earlier, Kirk Cousins became the highest paid free agent for the second time in 2024 after the Atlanta Falcons tampered and gave him $45 million a year. I can't say with certainty how the Falcons are going to do this year, but with the objective upgrade at quarterback and a new head coach that may not sabotage the offense at any given turn, I do like their chances to win the NFC South. Whether or not they do anything if they get in the dance, I'm not sure. But what I do know is that this quarterback-coach partnership can't be worse than what we saw last year.
Intercepted! Picked off! It is St. Juice with his first career interception and a brutal decision by Desmond Ridder.